I'm
Janny
so glad you two could
McAllister
finally
had
meet.
never
It's
been the
truly a
kind of
pleasure to
man
meet
who
you,
ran
Maria. I've heard
anywhere.
wonderful
The
things.
He
pleasure is
walked
mine.
through
Welcome
life the
to our
way a
home.
king might drift across his palace slowly, lazily, with the confidence of someone who knew the world bent itself to his whims. And why wouldn't it? He was a billionaire before he turned 40, a charming white man with deep pockets and a deeper appetite for pleasure. Women, champagne, private yachts, neon-lit nights, those were the rhythms that guided him. His friends joked that if every woman in the city became his ex-girlfriend overnight, Janny wouldn't even blink. He'd only sigh and ask, which city is next? So when the call came, a trembling voice informing him that his mother had died, his world hiccuped for the first time in years. Not stopped, not shattered, just hiccuped. A tiny crack in the glass. He wasn't even sure what he felt when he jumped into the back of his private car. Disbelief, annoyance, or maybe that faint ache he had buried decades ago so deep he had forgotten it existed. As the city blurred outside the tinted windows, Janny pressed his fingers to his temple. His mother, the woman he hadn't seen in God how many years, 7-10. He wasn't certain anymore. When the car screeched to a halt outside the funeral home, he practically leapt out the sudden adrenaline, surprising even himself. The lobby smelled like lilies and candle wax. A woman was sobbing in a corner. A priest murmured condolences to a pair of elderly attendees. Janny barely saw any of it. He only saw the casket. Dark mahogany, closed lid, a large framed portrait perched beside it. He didn't look at the portrait. He didn't need to. His throat tightened, and suddenly the man who never cried, not when his businesses crashed, not when lovers left, felt tears hot and reckless down his cheeks. A strangled sound tore from his throat. "Mom! Mom! I'm God! I'm late! I'm so—" The room froze. A dozen Filipinos stared at him as if he had just burst into their family dinner screaming. A middle-aged woman, eyes swollen from grief, stepped closer and whispered carefully, "Sir, who are you?" Janny blinked. His tears stopped midstream. A young man pointed awkwardly at the portrait. "That's our grandfather." Silence. Long enough to hear a pin drop. Long enough for Janny's entire ego to shrivel. "Oh," he managed to croak. "Right. Yes. Sorry. Wrong, dead person." He backed away like a guilty ghost, practically tripping over a floral wreath that read, "Rest in peace, Lolo Ramon." By the time he stormed outside, his ears burned with embarrassment. It took 5 minutes of frantic searching to find the correct funeral home. He arrived too late. His mother was already buried. No ceremony left. No goodbye. Only the faint scent of damp soil in the late afternoon air. Marcus, his older brother, dark-haired, stiff-backed, carrying the weight of the family, like an unpaid burden, stood beside him. No hug. No hello. Just a cold, formal nod. "You're late," Marcus said flatly. "So I've heard," Janny muttered. Marcus reached into his coat and tossed him a key ring, 3 keys attached to a faded leather fob. "Mom's apartment. You need to clear it out. The landlord wants it empty by next week." Janny stared at the keys as if they were burning his skin. "Why me?" Marcus shrugged. "Because she left it for you." Janny felt a jolt. Anger, guilt, confusion, but it evaporated beneath sarcasm. "I haven't lived there since I was 14. Why would she think She never stopped waiting for you." Marcus's voice cracked only slightly. "Even when you stopped waiting for her." The words hit harder than Janny expected. He shoved the keys into his pocket and turned away. "That apartment has nothing to do with me." Marcus didn't argue. He didn't even look disappointed. He simply nodded again, the way one nods when hearing something predictable. Janny hated that the most. Years ago, their parents had split with a brutality that scorched their childhood to ash. Lawyers shouting matches slammed doors, 2 adults too wounded to love anything but their own grievances. At the center of it all, two boys were told to choose. Choose me. Choose her. Choose this life, or that one. Janny had refused. He'd stormed out with nothing but a backpack and a burning sense of injustice. He forged his empire from scratch, fueled by spite and desperation, building skyscrapers from the ruins of his broken home. He never went back, not even once. But now, holding the keys to his mother's empty apartment, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades. A pull, a whisper, go. That evening, he found himself rolling the wheels of his polished, custom-made wheelchair down the dim hallway of his mother's old building. The chair was part of his act, a seduction tactic he had perfected over years. Women adored the handsome, damaged man with a tragic story. A little helplessness made them melt. Tonight, however, the chair felt heavier than usual. He stopped outside her door. Apartment 4B. The brass numbers were slightly crooked. He lifted his hand to knock on a door that no longer opened to anyone. His fingers trembled. He told himself it was the cold. Slowly, he closed his eyes as the soft hum of an old tune drifted through his memory. A song his mother used to play every morning, sunlight filtering through cheap curtains, coffee brewing on the stove. A song he had forgotten he remembered. But suddenly, there it was again, a faint melody, a whisper from behind the walls. Impossible. Her stereo. A neighbor. A ghost. He leaned closer, heart hammering unexpectedly, and the door beside him swung open. A woman stepped out. A black woman, tall and long-legged, her cocoa-brown skin glowing under the hallway lights like polished bronze. Tight curls framed her face in soft spirals, and her eyes' deep amber alert met his in a direct, disarming way. Her presence seemed to fill the narrow hallway. Janny forgot how to breathe. She wore athletic shorts and a tank top revealing a body carved by both strength and softness. A dancer's grace. A panther's fluidity. She paused mid-step, one hand on the doorknob, eyebrow raised. "Oh," she said, surprised but composed. "I didn't realize anyone was here." Her voice was smooth, low, a warm ribbon of sound. Janny scrambled to school his expression into something other than stunned idiot. He straightened, adjusted his posture in the chair, cleared his throat twice. Hi. Sorry. I didn't mean to block your door." "You weren't," she said, lips curving lightly. "But now you kind of are." Heat shot through his face. He rolled back a little. She stepped forward, locking her door behind her. The hallway suddenly felt too small. "I'm Alexia," she introduced herself, extending a hand. "I live next door. Or, well, I did. I'm moving out tomorrow." Janny reached out instinctively. Her hand was warm, strong, her nails painted copper gold. "Janny," he murmured. "My mother lived here. I came to see the place." Alexia's eyes softened just a fraction. "I heard. I'm sorry for your loss." The sincerity in her voice caught him off guard. He nodded, feeling a lump forming in his chest. They stood there suspended in a moment thicker than silence. Janny felt exposed, not because he wanted her, though that was undeniable, but because she looked at him as if she saw through him immediately. Not the billionaire, not the playboy, not the pretender in a wheelchair. Just him. He hated it. He loved it. He didn't know what to do with it. Alexia tilted her head, studying him more closely, eyes flicking to the wheelchair. "Do you need help getting inside?" she asked. He swallowed, suddenly aware of how much he depended on this chair, not physically, but emotionally. As a mask, a shield, a story. "No," he said quickly. "I'm fine." Her gaze lingered on him, unreadable. Then she stepped past the scent of vanilla and something smoky trailing behind her. For a moment her fingers brushed his shoulder, whether intentional or accidental he couldn't tell. But he felt it, down to the bone. "Take care, Janny," she said softly, and maybe open the door. Sometimes answers hide in places we never look. She walked away. He watched her until she vanished down the stairwell, heart thudding like a fist against a door he'd locked long ago. The hallway was silent again, except the music. That haunting tune leaking from inside apartment 4B. Janny closed his fingers around the key. He didn't know it yet, but everything, his lies, his wounds, his desires, his future, was about to collide with a woman whose life had been shaped by pain far deeper than his own. Not Alexia. Someone else. Someone waiting on the other side of the story. Chiara. And the moment Janny pushed open that door, the past he had spent a lifetime outrunning would return quiet, patient, and unstoppable. The hallway seemed quieter after Alexia disappeared down the stairwell, but her presence lingered like the echo of a warm note in a cold room. Janny sat motionless in his wheelchair, fingers curled loosely around its polished rims. He kept replaying that brief moment, the brush of her hand on his shoulder, the curve of her smile, the way her eyes held a glint of recognition, as if she had already seen the kind of man he was, but decided to give him a moment anyway. It made something inside him tighten. Not desire. Desire. He understood. Desire. He could manipulate. This was something stranger, sharper. He pushed the thought away and turned the key to his mother's apartment. Dust hung in the air like a faded memory. The place smelled of old paper and lavender, her favorite scent. A rhythmic throb started behind his eyes. He wasn't ready. He wasn't ready for any of this. He was about to back out to close the door and maybe never open it again, when footsteps clicked behind him. Leaving already. He spun too quickly, too sharply, for a man supposedly paralyzed from the waist down, and caught himself just in time, shifting his upper body to mimic the stiffness of someone who had no mobility in his legs. Alexia stood in the doorway again, holding a small cardboard box and a black trash bag. Her curls were a little messy now, a few strands falling over her temple, making her look even more effortlessly beautiful. She raised an eyebrow. "I thought you might still be here," she said. "I forgot my phone charger." Janny swallowed. "Right. Yeah. I'm just taking a look." She stepped closer, scanning the room behind him. "Feels strange, doesn't it? Seeing a place someone loved. One moment gone the next." Janny didn't trust himself to answer, not when the weight of her gaze made his skin prickle. She crouched beside him and began unplugging a charger from the outlet near his wheel. When she leaned over, he could smell her perfume, vanilla musk, a hint of citrus, and something subtle and warm beneath it. The kind of scent that made a man lean forward without realizing he was doing it. Then she looked up, her eyes, deep amber alert, locked onto his. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. The question had too much sincerity. It poked at something he didn't want exposed. He forced a half smile. "I'm fine," he lied. Alexia's gaze drifted down to his wheelchair. She studied the sleek design, the clean chrome, the custom leather seat, too pristine for someone who used it daily. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Injured recently? There it was, the question he knew would come. He straightened his posture carefully, composing the face of the tragic wounded billionaire, a persona he had perfected long before he ever sat in this chair. "I don't like to talk about it," he murmured, lowering his gaze just enough to appear fragile instead of evasive. Alexia sighed, her features softening again. "Sorry. Didn't mean to pry." But she was still studying him, and for the first time he wasn't sure he liked that. There was something unsettling about her directness, as if she could peel back layers he didn't even know he carried. "What are you doing tomorrow night?" she asked suddenly. Janny blinked. Nothing, I think." "Good." Then you can help me move this box downstairs. She lifted the cardboard carton light enough for her to carry with one hand, but she held it in a way that made it seem heavier. Janny stared at it, then at her. How exactly do you expect me to help? He asked dryly, gesturing to his legs. A slow smile curved her lips. By telling me what not to bump into while I walk. Emotional support is important too. He couldn't help a small laugh. She stood straight again. One hip cocked, her tank top shifting slightly with the movement. There was something magnetic about her, not just her beauty, but the way she occupied space with ease. She wasn't trying to impress him, and that made him want her more. She extended a hand. So, tomorrow night? He hesitated, then nodded. Sure, good. She started walking toward the stairs, then paused and turned her head just enough for her curls to sway. And Janny. Yes, you can buy a lot of things with money, but honesty isn't one of them. His breath caught. She smiled a slow, knowing smile and descended the stairs. The next evening, Janny arrived early. Too early. He told himself it was because he needed time to roll across the narrow hallway without scuffing the chair, but the truth gnawed at him. He wanted to see her again. Badly. Alexia opened the door with a flourish, wearing denim shorts and a loose white t-shirt that fell off one shoulder. The soft glow of her apartment lights kissed the bronze of her skin. You're punctual, she teased. I try. No, you don't, she corrected. You strike me as the kind of man who shows up late on purpose to make an entrance. Janny froze. Do I? Oh, absolutely, she grinned. But you're early today, which means this matters. The remark hit him dead center, and he cleared his throat, flustered. Let's just get these boxes. Alexia chuckled and handed him a small stack of items to set on his lap. When she crouched again, she glanced briefly at his legs, her gaze unreadable. Something in her expression flickered, but she didn't comment. Instead, she moved close enough that he felt the warmth of her arm brush his. You're different from what I expected, she said quietly. What did you expect? Arrogance? Ego? The usual. And now, she stood resting the box on her hip. Her face softened unexpectedly. Now I think you're someone trying very hard not to feel alone. Janny stiffened. He swallowed, but the words caught in his throat. She saw too much. She saw right through him. He hated that. He needed that. But he had to regain control. I was going to ask you out, he said suddenly. For dinner. Or coffee. Something. Alexia raised an eyebrow. Were you? Yes. She laughed. Janny, look at you. You're handsome in a polished older guy way, but you are so not my type. He felt heat crawl up his neck. Older guy. Polished. Not her type. She must have seen the sting in his eyes, because she softened again, resting a hand on his shoulder. It's not personal. I like my men young, wild, full of chaotic energy. Guys who dance barefoot at music festivals and don't care what the world thinks. And I care. You care too much, she said gently. About appearances, control, being admired. Nothing about you is messy or spontaneous, not in a way that feels real. Janny opened his mouth to object, but she continued. You're beautiful, yes, but I like a different kind of beautiful. It hit harder than it should have. He shouldn't care he had been rejected thousands of times, and half those women crawled back eventually. But Alexia wasn't like them. She didn't want his money. She didn't want his charm. She didn't want him. And that made him want her even more. Desperation stirred. He leaned back casually, too casually, and said, What if I told you I own 148 athletic stores nationwide, and a 2,000 square meter mansion, and a 9-figure bank account? Alexia paused. Then, she smirked. Well, damn, she whispered, lips curling. Why didn't you say so? She set the box down, walked closer, leaned forward and tapped his chin with a single finger. In that case, dinner at my place this weekend. Janny inhaled sharply. Victory surged in his veins, hot, triumphant, intoxicating. But beneath it, another emotion stirred. An unease, a warning. Because while Alexia was stunning, fire embodied, impossible to ignore. It was the woman waiting inside her house, the one he had not yet met, who would shift his entire world off its axis. A shadow passed behind Alexia's doorway. A silhouette. A second presence. Her voice, calm, melodic. Nothing like Alexia's sharp sweetness floated through the air. Lex. Who's there? Alexia raised her voice. Just a friend. Janny's heart jolted unexpectedly. He didn't know why. He didn't yet know her name. He didn't yet know her story. He didn't yet know she lived her life from a wheelchair with more dignity than he'd ever shown in his own lies. But he would. Very soon. Alexia turned back to him and grinned. You'll meet her on Saturday. Who? He asked. My sister. She winked. Her name is Chiara. And just like that, Janny's carefully curated world, his schemes, his charm, his lies began tilting toward a woman he had never seen. A woman who would become everything. The countryside lay under a soft amber dusk when Janny's red supercar glided down the narrow road. The machine didn't belong there. Its polished curves and roaring engine looked absurd against fields of tall grass-rusted fences and tired wooden houses leaning into the wind. And yet Janny didn't slow down. He was too busy rehearsing expressions in the mirror, adjusting the collar of his designer shirt, or wondering why he felt a strange flutter in his stomach. This wasn't a date. It was strategy, a game he had always mastered. At least that's what he told himself. When the navigation voice announced he had arrived, Janny pulled over several hundred meters away. He couldn't risk being seen stepping out of the car walking perfectly fine before transitioning into his tragically paralyzed persona. So he parked behind a cluster of scraggly trees, opened the trunk, and pulled out his wheelchair. The sleek one, custom-built, absurdly expensive. He lowered himself into it with practiced ease, locking his feet into place, arranging his posture with the meticulousness of an actor stepping into character. All right, he whispered, clearing his throat. Let's win this. Then he began pushing himself down the gravel road. Every small bump in the ground rumbled through his bones, and dust clung to his shoes and the wheels. By the time the small house appeared in view, a cozy bungalow painted pale blue, his palms were already sweating. From the open kitchen window, he heard laughter, light, warm, a melody dancing on the evening breeze. Alexia's voice. He inhaled deeply. He could already picture her smile, the way her curls bounced when she spoke, the glow of her bronze skin under soft lights. His heart thudded a little quicker. For all her teasing, Alexia had invited him. That had to mean something. He rolled up to the front door and exhaled the nerves out of his lungs. Then he knocked. The door swung open at once. Alexia stood there, radiant in a simple summer dress that hugged her hips and flowed down to her knees. Her skin shimmered like polished obsidian under the warm light inside. She leaned against the door frame, her lips curving into a smile that made the air warm. You made it, she said. Wouldn't miss it, he answered smoothly. But before Alexia could say more, another voice floated softly from inside Lex. Is that him? Alexia stepped aside, and the world shifted, because sitting a few feet behind her was a woman who didn't look like she belonged to the same reality as anyone else in that house, a woman whose presence drew the room into perfect silence. Chiara. Her wheelchair was simpler than his, worn at the wheels, but she sat in it as though it were a throne. She had the kind of face sculptors dreamed of: strong cheekbones, a full mouth, and eyes with enough depth to pull a man apart. Her skin was a deep, luminous mahogany, smooth and flawless. Her curls were gathered into a high puff, a halo that framed her face with effortless elegance. And even from across the room, Janny felt the impact of her gaze, steady, calm, curious. This woman didn't flirt. She didn't perform. She simply existed. And somehow, that was enough to shake him. Alexia beamed. "Janny, this is my sister Chiara." Chiara's hands moved gracefully along her wheels, guiding her closer. When she reached him, she extended a hand with gentle confidence. "Welcome," she said. Her voice was low, warm, with a softness that contrasted Alexia's sharp brightness. "I'm glad you could join us tonight." Janny stared a beat too long before taking her hand. Her grip wasn't weak. It wasn't tentative. It was purposeful. She didn't look at him with pity or fascination. She didn't glance at his wheelchair the way people usually did. She looked at him as a person fully, directly. It startled him so much, he almost forgot to breathe. Alexia clapped her hands, oblivious to the sparks silently crackling between them. "Dinner's almost ready. You two talk. I need to check the cornbread." She disappeared toward the kitchen, leaving Janny alone with Chiara. Silence unfolded. Not awkward, but charged, like the brief pause before a symphony begins. Chiara's eyes softened. "Long drive." "Yeah," he answered, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "Worth it, though." She smiled, a small private curve of her lips that made his heart stumble. "You must think this is a strange place," she said. "Lex tends to invite people before warning me. Honestly, I don't mind surprises." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Really? You seem like the type who prefers predictability." It struck him harder than Alexia's playful teasing. Chiara didn't say it to provoke him. She said it because she saw it. She read him with a clarity he found both intriguing and unsettling. "I like some unpredictability," he countered weakly. Her eyes twinkled. "Do you—" He didn't know how to respond without lying again, so he shifted subjects. "You and Alexia are close." Something flickered in her gaze, a shadow of pain before she masked it with a steady breath. "Very," she said softly. "We've had to be." He opened his mouth to ask more, but she turned her chair and gestured for him to follow her into the living room. He rolled beside her, careful to maintain the posture of someone who couldn't use his legs. Inside the room was small but warm pictures on the wall, a bookshelf full of worn spines, soft blankets draped over the couch. Chiara's presence made the space feel anchored, peaceful. "I heard you've had a difficult week," she said gently. Janny stiffened. "Alexia told you." "Not the details," she said, "but I saw the look in your eyes. I know grief when I see it." Her words pierced him, and unexpectedly, dangerously, he wanted to tell her everything. How he'd been too late. How he'd cried over a stranger's coffin. How guilt sat like a stone in his chest. But Chiara didn't push. She simply sat beside him, their wheelchairs almost touching, and waited. It was too intimate, too real. He tore his gaze away before she could see the conflict brewing inside him. Dinner was a lively affair, mostly because Alexia did all the talking. She buzzed around them, recounting childhood stories, teasing Chiara, occasionally flirting with Janny in a half-serious, half-playful way that made his head spin. But his eyes kept drifting back to Chiara. The way she laughed, not loudly like Alexia, but softly, with her whole face. The way she listened, fully present. The way she held her fork delicately despite the tremor that occasionally ran through her right hand. The way she caught his eyes sometimes and held them for a heartbeat too long. Not flirtation. Connection. Real connection. It terrified him. because for the first time in years, he wasn't in control. Later, when the night settled into a calmer rhythm, Alexia stepped outside to take a call from a friend, loudly dramatically promising she would spill everything later. Janny and Chiara remained alone in the warm glow of the living room. Chiara shifted slightly, her fingers tracing a seam in her jeans. "Lex likes you," she said. Janny choked. "What I thought she said, I wasn't her type." "Oh, she meant romantically, sure. But she likes you as a person. She doesn't bring many people home." Chiara paused, especially not after meeting them only once. Janny didn't know what to do with the tightness in his chest. He should have felt triumphant. Instead, he felt guilty. "Chiara," he said softly, "this wasn't what I expected tonight." "What did you expect?" He hesitated. Then, and he didn't know why he chose honesty for once. "I expected to be with Alexia. To pursue something." Chiara didn't flinch. She looked at him steadily, thoughtfully. And now, he swallowed. His heart thudded. His lungs tightened. His whole body felt like a string pulled taut, ready to snap. Now he whispered, "I don't know what I feel." Her expression didn't change, but something warm flickered in her eyes, a quiet recognition, a soft ache, a mirror of his own confusion. Before she could answer, Alexia barged back inside, announcing dessert, as if nothing in the world had shifted. But everything had. Because Janny knew deep in the marrow of his bones that he wasn't thinking about Alexia anymore. Not even a little. He was thinking about Chiara. Her voice, her presence, her strength, her beauty that didn't beg to be seen, but demanded to be felt. And that terrified him more than any lie he had ever told. That night, when Janny returned to the city and met his friends for drinks, he tried to recount the evening. But every time he mentioned Chiara, his voice softened without meaning to. His friends noticed and laughed loudly. "What's wrong?" Janny, one teased. "Scared to flirt with someone who's also in a wheelchair." Heat surged to his cheeks. "Don't be ridiculous." "Oh, come on," another chimed in. "Maybe you're afraid she'll see through your little act." They howled with laughter. Janny forced a smirk, but their words stabbed deeper than they realized. Because he was afraid. Afraid that Chiara already saw through him. Afraid that she could unravel him with a single look. Afraid that he wasn't worthy of the way she met his eyes, honest and unguarded. And for the first time in his life, the thrill didn't come from the chase. It came from the fear of losing something he didn't even have yet. Later that night, alone in his penthouse, with the city glowing below him like a field of fallen stars, Janny whispered to the empty room, "I need to see her again. Not Alexia, Chiara. The woman who made him want not to win, not to seduce, not to conquer, but to be better." And he didn't understand yet that this desire, this shift inside him was not the beginning of a game. It was the beginning of his undoing. Janny had never been the one to wait. Women usually answered his messages within minutes, if not seconds, eager, curious, or at least entertained by the idea of a billionaire wanting their time. But when he sent Chiara a simple text, "Dinner. Just the two of us," she did not reply. Hours passed. Then half a day. Then an entire night. By the next morning, Janny had checked his phone so many times, his assistant finally asked if everything was all right. He brushed her off, pretending it was just business. But inside, something restless gnawed at him. Why wasn't she answering? Was she ignoring him? Did she see through him already? He told himself he didn't care. He cared far too much. Around noon, as he stepped into the glossy marble lobby of his company headquarters, the security guards straightened. His assistant hurried beside him, reciting meeting schedules. Employees glanced up with nervous energy, fear and admiration in equal measure. And then every head turned, because the elevator doors slid open, and Chiara rolled out as if she owned the room. Her wheelchair gleamed in the sharp overhead lights. She wore a black blazer over a fitted wine-red top, her curls gathered in a neat high-puff lipstick, soft but striking. She moved with the assurance of someone who knew exactly who she was and refused to apologize for any part of it. Conversations died mid-sentence. His assistant blinked. Janny stopped walking. Chiara's eyes found him instantly. "You didn't answer my message," he blurted, before realizing he sounded like a teenager. She smiled slowly, calm, warm, confident. "I thought replying would take too long," she said. "So I came here instead." Employees stared openly as she approached him. Something electric shifted in the room. Even the air felt tighter. "I have a match today," she continued. "A wheelchair tennis tournament outside the city. I thought you might want to come." There was no flirtation in her voice, no invitation wrapped in coyness. She offered the words plainly, like truth itself. Janny's heart gave a small, involuntary leap. "Yes," he said too quickly. "Of course." Her smile widened a fraction. "Good. It starts in 2 hours." With that, she turned and headed toward the exit. He realized she expected him to follow, and he did. 2 hours later, Janny had a problem. A big one. He had forgotten his wheelchair. His assistant blinked at him as if he'd announced he had forgotten his pants. "You're kidding," she said. "Right." Janny ran a hand through his hair. "Just find one. Somewhere." "You want me to steal a wheelchair from Borrow," he corrected. "Borrow permanently." She pinched the bridge of her nose. "Sir, please, I beg you." "Don't do this. She's smart. She'll find out. Just get the chair," he barked, already anxious that he'd be late. 15 minutes later, his assistant returned red-faced, pushing a rickety old wheelchair that squeaked on one side. Janny stared at it in horror. "What is that? The only one I could borrow without getting arrested." He glared at her. But he had no choice. When he rolled into the tennis venue, every squeak amplified by the concrete floor, he wished he could sink into the earth. But then he saw Chiara, and everything else faded. She was already on the court, wearing athletic gear that framed her toned arms and strong shoulders. Her wheelchair was built for sport, low-angled wheels, sleek metal cushioned straps. She adjusted her gloves, then pushed off with explosive power. She didn't glide. She flew. Each stroke was a declaration of strength, each pivot a testament to precision. Her body, though bound to the chair, moved with a freedom Janny had never witnessed. No fragility, no hesitation, just raw, brilliant will. Janny's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't inspiration. It wasn't pity. It was awe, pure, unfiltered awe. The crowd burst into applause as she delivered a sharp, spinning serve that ricocheted past her opponent. Her eyes stayed locked, fierce, unbreakable. Janny felt something deep inside him shift, something he couldn't name yet, something dangerously close to reverence. After the match, Chiara rolled toward him with a grin still flushed from exertion. "You came," she said, sounding breathless but proud. "Of course," he swallowed. "You were incredible." She shrugged lightly, though her cheeks warmed at the praise. "It's just sport." "No," he said firmly. "It's strength." Her gaze softened. "Thank you." Before he could say more, before he could decide whether to confess or lie or run, she casually added, "A few of us are grabbing dinner. You should come." "A few," Janny repeated. He regretted it immediately, because moments later he found himself at a large table, surrounded by a group of confident, sharp-eyed black women who looked at him as if they were evaluating every cell in his body. One leaned toward Chiara, whispering audibly, "This him," another replied, "Mm-hmm. The billionaire with the good jawline. We need to assess." Yes, men like that come with warnings. Janny cleared his throat. "Evening, ladies." They stared at him like he was a sample in a lab experiment. Chiara hid a smile behind her hand. But Janny was undeterred. He turned on the charm, subtle humor, soft compliments, effortless conversation. Not the seductive facade he used on Alexia or countless others, but something gentler. Sincere. Surprisingly, it worked. Not because of money he carefully avoided mentioning any, but because he listened, really listened, and Chiara noticed. Outside, when the evening turned cool and the group dispersed, his assistant tugged at his sleeve, pulling him aside. "Sir," she hissed quietly, "this is wrong. You're lying to her. She's kind, you can see that. When she finds out you're not paralyzed." "She won't," he snapped. His assistant's eyes widened. "Janny, don't be this man." He smirked, masking the sting of her words. "I'm a blank page in love. Remember, I'll be fine." But as he watched Chiara laughing softly with one of her friends, something twisted inside him. It didn't feel fine. Not at all. The next evening, he attended her small music showcase, an intimate lounge lit by candles and warm amber lamps. Chiara wheeled onto the stage holding a guitar. When she began playing, her voice rolled through the room like velvet, deep, rich, and achingly tender. His chest tightened. This woman, she wasn't just strong. She was art. Halfway through her set, she removed her jacket. The soft lights illuminated her toned shoulders, the graceful lines of her arms, the subtle shimmer of sweat at her collarbone. Janny felt his pulse hammer. He leaned forward too far. His old borrowed wheelchair slipped a wheel over the edge of a rug, and he toppled sideways. Chairs clattered. A waitress screeched. Someone dropped a tray of water glasses. Janny flailed wildly, grabbing at the tablecloth. The entire lounge gasped, and Chiara mid-performance paused just long enough to laugh. Not mockingly, not pitying, just warm, amused, and impossibly charming. Janny had never wanted the earth to swallow him so badly. He had also never wanted a woman more. After the show, they walked well-rolled and walked through the quiet city streets lit by soft street lamps. The silence between them felt tender, electric. When they reached a hotel entrance, Janny cleared his throat. "I was thinking we could, maybe go upstairs and have a cup of tea." Chiara's eyes glimmered with playful wisdom. "Tea," she echoed. He nodded vigorously. Yes, tea. She wasn't fooled, not for a second. But she said gently, "All right." The elevator ride felt like a slow ascension into some dreamscape, neither fully understood. When they reached the room and closed the door, the air thickened. Chiara leaned close, her lips warm against his. Their first kiss wasn't hurried or desperate. It was slow, exploratory. A question and an answer. Janny felt his world tilt completely, irrevocably. But when he deepened the kiss, letting instinct take over, Chiara placed a soft hand on his chest. "Not tonight," she whispered. "I have a performance tomorrow, and I want this to matter." Janny blinked. No one had ever said that to him. No woman had ever told him to slow down, not out of fear, but out of respect for herself, for him, for the moment. He pulled back, breathless. "Okay," he whispered. She smiled, brushing her thumb against his cheek. "Good night, Janny." As she left, a strange ache settled in him. Not frustration, not wounded pride. Something else. Reverence, longing, and the first flicker of love. Because for the first time, Janny realized he wasn't chasing Chiara for conquest or vanity. He was chasing her because something deep in him, something quiet, something true, recognized her as the kind of woman who could change him. And he was terrified he might want that. The next evening, just before the sun dipped behind the distant hills, Janny waited at the entrance of his mansion, an estate so sprawling it looked like a private resort, carved out of marble glass and shimmering water. He had invited Chiara over, and now he was pacing. Why was he nervous? He had entertained supermodels, Celebrities, influencers, women who arrived like tropical birds in designer dresses and left before sunrise, without leaving so much as a ripple in his chest. But tonight, his heart felt too large for his ribs. When Chiara finally arrived in a sleek black car, the world seemed to pause. She emerged gracefully, wheeling herself down the custom ramp he had asked his staff to build barely an hour ago. Her hair was gathered loosely at the back of her head, a few curls falling around her face. She wore a midnight blue dress that shimmered with each breath she took. The moment she smiled, the tension in his chest loosened and tightened all over again. "You have a beautiful home," she said, looking around the courtyard. "Almost too beautiful." He returned her smile, though it faltered with guilt. "It's just a place. Tonight, I'd rather focus on you." Her cheeks warmed. "Then show me." He led her through tall glass doors into a living room bathed in golden light. Beyond the open windows, the infinity pool stretched toward the horizon, reflecting the fiery streaks of sunset. Water caressed the edges with a quiet whisper, like the night was breathing. As they moved toward the terrace, Chiara paused and tilted her head. "Can I ask you something?" His pulse skipped. "Of course. What happened to your legs?" The question lay between them, like a blade on silk. Janny's world slowed. He felt the old instinct rise, create a story, make it believable, keep control. A decade of manipulating women with charm and carefully curated vulnerability had sharpened his lying to an art. And yet, lying to Chiara felt like carving into his own chest. But fear won. He forced an exhale, painting his expression with artificial sorrow. "An accident," he murmured. "A stupid fall." "I don't like to talk about it." Chiara studied him, not with suspicion, but with a tenderness that made the lie burn. She nodded slowly, accepting the explanation because she believed he deserved that trust. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. Her eyes glimmered in the warm dusk light. Then she added, "I'll tell you my story, if you want to hear it." He needed to hear everything about her. Chiara drew a long breath. "I wasn't always like this," she began. "I used to dance." Janny blinked. "Dance ballet." A wistful smile tugged at her lips. "I was good, really good. My whole life revolved around it. Rehearsals, performances, aching muscles, bleeding feet. The beautiful kind of pain." She laughed lightly. "I lived for it." Janny imagined her on a stage, spinning, lifting, floating like light in human form. For a moment, the ache in her voice cut his chest in two. One night, she continued on the way home from practice. Another driver ran a red light. My car flipped. My spinal cord. Her voice thinned. I woke up and nothing from the waist down worked anymore. She wasn't crying, but her eyes carried the weight of a tragedy lived too many times. Janny's fingers tightened around the arms of his borrowed wheelchair. "And if that wasn't enough," Chiara said quietly, "my boyfriend at the time, someone I thought would stay with me, slept with another woman while I was still in the hospital." His stomach dropped. "He said he couldn't handle the responsibility," she whispered. "He didn't want a partner who needed help." Every word hit him like a blow. He wanted to tear the world apart for what had been done to her. But then she said the sentence that would haunt him long after tonight. "I don't hate disability, Janny. I hate people who lie." The air left his lungs. His pulse roared in his ears. If she ever found out, she would walk away from him forever. To escape the tightening in his throat, he changed the atmosphere. "Come with me," he said, voice low and warm. He guided her to the poolside, where an elaborate setup waited, floating lanterns glowing on the water, drifting candles forming soft halos of light. A wide circular float anchored in the center with cushions and a low table draped in silk. Fairy lights twinkled like fallen stars woven across the palm trees. Chiara gasped softly. "This is magical." "No," he murmured, helping her onto the float. "This is just the beginning." They drifted gently while the world darkened around them. The sky deepened into indigo. The pool shimmered with reflections like scattered diamonds. Soft music played jazz, soulful and intimate. They talked. They laughed. And sometimes they fell silent, simply looking at each other, the night holding them like a secret. When he brushed his fingers over her hand, she didn't pull away. When he leaned closer, she didn't resist. Her lips tasted like wine in quiet longing. The rest unfolded with a sweetness he had never known. Not hurried, not mechanical, not driven by ego or conquest. It felt like surrender, like opening a door inside himself he didn't know existed. In her arms, he felt like a man stripped of every persona, just human, vulnerable, wanting. Just alive. Much later, when they lay close on the soft cushions, Chiara traced her fingers down his jaw. "I didn't expect tonight to be beautiful," she murmured. He smiled into her hair. "I didn't expect anything in my life to feel real." She didn't understand what he meant. Maybe he didn't either. When she eventually fell asleep against him, breathing deep and steady, Janny felt something unrecognizable tightening in his chest. Not lust, not triumph, fear. Because he wanted her, because she mattered, and because the lie beneath them was a fault line ready to shatter everything. After she left, after he watched her car disappear down the long driveway, something reckless and immature surged back inside him. He grabbed his phone, snapped a picture of the lantern-lit pool, the floating bed, his bare chest still warm from her touch. Then he sent it to his group chat. "Look who spent the night with the king." The responses came fast, a barrage of laughing emojis, crude jokes, shock mockery. And then, "You're a piece of trash, Janny. This girl seems different. You're seriously messing with her. Disgusting." He ignored all of it, opened another app, texted another woman, met her at a bar, kissed her, and felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. Her perfume, her hands on his shoulders, her voice in his ear, none of it touched him. He excused himself mid-date, walked out and sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel like he was drowning. Chiara's face haunted him. The softness in her voice, the honesty in her eyes, the strength in her story. He turned on the engine, then turned it off. Finally, he grabbed his phone and called her. When they met the next day in a quiet cafe, the moment he saw her smile, guilt slammed into him like a fist. He wanted to tell her the truth, needed to. The lie was a stone in his throat. "Chiara," he began, his voice rough, "I need to talk to you about something important." She tilted her head gently. "All right. What is it?" But then she spoke again before he could find the courage. "Can I tell you something first?" she asked. "It's personal." He nodded. She took a careful breath. "I'm learning to trust again. After everything I went through, I promised myself I'd never let another liar near my heart. If I ever feel someone isn't being honest with me, I'm gone. No second chances." The words shattered him. He looked down at his useless borrowed wheelchair, his disguise, his shield, his biggest betrayal. His confession evaporated on his tongue. Cowardice curled around him like chains. And for the first time in his life, Janny McAllister, the man who always walked away first, was terrified. Terrified of losing the one woman who had made him want to be more than a lie. For 2 days, Janny lived inside a storm, a quiet one. The kind where nothing seems to move, yet everything trembles beneath the surface. He ate nothing, slept barely a few hours. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Chiara's face, her trust, her honesty, her gentle strength. And every time he opened them again, he saw his own reflection, a liar, dressed in borrowed wheels. He knew the truth had to come out. He also knew he didn't have the courage to say it. The longer he waited, the sharper the guilt became, like a stone grinding down his ribs. But he kept putting it off, telling himself, tomorrow, I'll tell her. Except tomorrow never came, because fate, as always, had other plans. Alexia strikes. The one person Janny did not expect to confront him was Alexia. And yet there she was, bursting into his office like a thunderstorm wrapped in a red dress, curls bouncing wildly, fury radiating off her like heat. She slammed the door so hard the walls shuddered. "You," she hissed, pointing a finger at him, "are the most pathetic man I've ever met." Janny blinked. "Alexia, wait, no. You don't get to talk." She strode toward him, hands clenched so tight her knuckles whitened. "You lied to my sister Janny, the strongest woman I know, the kindest, the one person who still believes the world has something good left in it." He swallowed hard. "I was going to tell her, when she shouted, when you got tired of playing pretend, when you found someone new, when you crushed her heart into dust like every other woman you've entertained." Janny's jaw clenched. Shame crashed through him. "I didn't mean to hurt her." "You already did." Alexia leaned so close their foreheads almost touched. "You have 2 days to tell her the truth. If you don't," she tapped the armrest of his phony wheelchair, "I'll make sure you sit in one of these for real." Her voice dropped to a terrifying whisper. "Permanently." Janny flinched. Then, stupidly instinctively, he tried to diffuse the situation with cowardice, disguised as charm. Maybe you could tell her for me?" Alexia's stare froze him solid. "If I stay here another second," she growled, "I'll put you through a wall." She spun on her heel and left, leaving Janny in a room full of silence, the air still vibrating with her rage. Somehow, he felt he deserved every ounce of it. A sister knows. That night, Alexia returned home fuming, ready to expose Janny's lie then and there. She found Chiara in the living room, reading a book with a blanket draped over her lap, looking serene, too serene for the storm Alexia carried inside. Alexia began, voice tight. "I need to ask you something." Chiara set her book aside. "What's wrong?" "Do you—" Alexia hesitated, then blurted it out. "Do you want to break up with Janny?" Chiara lifted a brow. "That depends. What exactly are you trying not to say?" Alexia paced for a moment, wringing her hands. "Look, I shouldn't be the one telling you this, but he's lying to you. About being—" She gestured vaguely at her sister's wheelchair. "You know." Chiara didn't even blink. "You mean the fact that he can walk?" Alexia froze entirely. You knew." A soft smile touched Chiara's lips, melancholic and wise. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "I've spent years studying every angle a body moves, every line of posture, every muscle that contracts when someone pretends. I can tell the difference between a person who can't walk," her fingers brushed her knees light as a sigh, "and one who simply won't." Alexia sank onto the couch, stunned. "So why didn't you say anything?" Chiara looked down at her hands, voice soft as dusk. "Because it felt good," she whispered. "To be wanted, to be seen, to feel beautiful again." Her eyes glinted with something fragile. "I knew it wouldn't last. But some moments are worth having, even if they break later." Alexia reached out and squeezed her sister's hand. For the first time, she didn't know what to say. Sunset Red. The next day, Janny and Chiara were scheduled to join the Sunset Red Tour, a small spiritual excursion along old coastal landmarks. Chiara insisted on going despite sensing the heaviness around them. Maybe she needed clarity. Maybe she needed closure. Janny, meanwhile, felt like a man walking toward the edge of a cliff. They traveled in silence, both pretending nothing was wrong. The bus dropped them at a hilltop overlooking a centuries-old church. The air smelled of sea breeze and sun-warmed stone. As they approached the entrance, a priest in simple robes stepped outside, his gaze falling first on Chiara with warmth, then on Janny with an unreadable expression. "You," the priest said, beckoning him inside. "Come, I need a word." Chiara looked puzzled, but Janny followed. Inside, light streamed through colored glass, casting gentle hues across the stone floor. The priest's voice echoed softly. "You're carrying a lie, son." Janny stiffened. "I don't know what you—" "Your shoes," the priest cut in. "They creased at the ankles as you prayed outside. A man without the use of his legs doesn't wear his soles down like that." Janny felt the ground tilt beneath him. "You walk," the priest said simply. "So why pretend you cannot?" His heart pounded painfully. "I didn't mean to hurt her," Janny whispered. "Intent does not erase harm." The priest's tone softened, not unkind. "Every person who comes here seeks hope. Do not take that from them, and do not take it from the woman beside you." Janny's throat tightened. He wanted to confess everything to Chiara, to the priest, to the world. But fear had rooted itself so deeply that every truth felt like poison on his tongue. Before he could speak, a shout echoed from outside. Janny, Chiara's voice. He turned. Through the open doorway, he saw her rolling across the road, smiling faintly, as though she were trying to shake off the heaviness of the day. Then he saw the car, a sharp curve, a flash of silver, tires screeching. The world narrowed to a single point. Chiara. He didn't think, didn't hesitate, didn't remember he was supposed to be paralyzed. His body moved before thought could catch it. Muscles firing, feet pounding the stone arms, sweeping forward as he sprinted faster than he had in years. He reached her, just as the car skidded dangerously close, grabbing the handles of her chair and yanking her backward out of harm's way. The car swerved, howling past them, vanishing down the hill. Silence dropped like a stone. Chiara stared at him, standing, breathing hard, alive. Her voice was barely a whisper. "So, you really can walk." His throat closed. No excuse came. No lie. No charm. Nothing. He opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. Chiara's eyes darkened, not with anger at first, but with something worse, disappointment so deep it hollowed him out. "I trusted you," she said quietly. "I trusted. The parts of you I thought were real." Tears threatened to sting, but Janny couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. He reached out instinctively, but she rolled back out of his reach. "Don't," she whispered. The ache in her voice carved a canyon in his chest. Then she turned slowly, deliberately, and left him standing alone in the middle of the road, the final thread snapping between them like a broken violin string. For the first time since his mother's funeral, Janny felt utterly devastatingly empty. As the sun set behind the church and the sky burned red, he understood. This was only the beginning of the price he would pay. When Chiara turned away from him on that sun-burned road, Janny felt something snap cleanly inside his chest, as if a glass heart he didn't even know he possessed finally shattered. But the universe wasn't finished with him. Not even close. If heartbreak was the first blow, humiliation came roaring in right behind it. The collapse news traveled fast within the glittering circles Janny lived in. Faster than truth. Faster than apologies. Faster than regret. And when one man fell from grace, everyone seemed eager to take a piece of him on the way down. The scandal resurrected itself, the one he thought he had buried long ago. His affair with the wife of a close friend. Something stupid, thoughtless. A drunken night years earlier, regretted the moment it ended, forgotten by everyone except the one man who should have mattered most. That friend David showed up at Janny's mansion late one evening, pounding on the front door with fury that shook the entire structure. When Janny opened it, David didn't speak. He punched him. Hard. Then again. And again. The blows fell like stones from the sky, merciless, inevitable. Janny didn't raise a hand to defend himself. Didn't run. Didn't shout. He let every hit land because some part of him believed he deserved each one. "You ruined my life," David spat, chest heaving. "Now yours is ruined too." Then he left Janny bleeding on the marble floor. As if on cue, the others began to disappear. Friends, business partners, women who used to orbit him like satellites. People who once laughed at his jokes, drank his wine, lounged on his sofas. They vanished into silence, as though a switch had been flipped, and every door in his life had locked from the outside. No one answered his calls. No one returned his messages. No one cared. Even the mansion, the symbol of his power, felt cavernous, echoing cold, like a mausoleum built for a man still breathing. And somewhere in that darkness, a sob rose inside him. One he hadn't let himself feel for years. At his mother's grave, desperate for something familiar, anything, Janny drove to the cemetery where his mother rested. The wind was sharp, slicing across the open grounds like invisible blades. He stood before a tombstone and let grief spill out of him. Sobs he had swallowed since childhood tore their way up his throat. Apologies rained from his lips, too late, too tangled, too raw. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice breaking. "I'm sorry for everything. I should have been a better son. I should have." He froze. The name on the stone wasn't hers. He had cried at the wrong grave again. The absurdity of it hit him first, then the sorrow, then the shame. He collapsed onto his knees, laughing and crying at the same time, a broken sound torn from a heart that had no idea how to beat properly anymore. He wondered if he'd spent his whole life standing in the wrong places, wrong choices, wrong chances, wrong lies. And now, wrong grave. Everything seemed to prove the same pathetic truth. He didn't belong anywhere. The last thread. Days passed like fading photographs, color draining little by little. No Chiara, no trust, no friends, no forgiveness. Janny drifted through his mansion like a ghost, trapped in the body of a man. He wandered hallways he once filled with laughter and music. He stood before mirrors he used to admire himself in, now cracking beneath their reflections. He skipped meetings, calls, responsibilities. Business declined. Newspapers whispered. Rumors sharpened. He didn't care. There was only one thing he cared about now, and she had walked away. One morning, after another sleepless night, he woke with a single thought burning in his mind, like a final ember. Find her. No matter what, searching for her. He drove to the familiar house at the edge of the quiet neighborhood, where the air always smelled of jasmine and warm bread. But when the door opened, it wasn't Chiara or Alexia. It was their grandmother, an elderly woman with warm brown skin, silver-threaded hair, and eyes that held more wisdom than cruelty. Janny didn't speak. His throat closed as he fell to his knees on the front step. "Please," he choked. "Please, I need to find her. I need to explain. I can't breathe without knowing she's okay." The grandmother watched him tremble like a storm-struck tree. She didn't scold him, though she could have. Didn't shut the door. Didn't call the police. Instead, she sighed softly. "Young man," she said gently, "you look like someone who finally understands what he stands to lose." Janny bowed his head. "I've lost everything." "No," she corrected. "You've only lost what didn't matter." He looked up shakily, eyes burning. The old woman studied him for a long moment, seeing past the wealth, past the mistakes, past the frantic desperation straight into the raw wound of him. Finally, she nodded toward the street. She's performing tonight, at the theater downtown. If your heart is true, go to her. The words hit him with the force of salvation. He didn't say thank you. He couldn't. He simply ran like a man fleeing the ruins of his old life. The confrontation. He arrived at the crowded intersection just in time to see the bus pulling away a familiar silhouette inside. Without thinking, Janny sped ahead, cutting the bus off with reckless abandon. Horns blared, traffic snarled, people cursed. But none of it mattered. Not compared to the woman sitting inside. He boarded the bus, breathless, heart hammering violently. Passengers stared, murmuring, but he ignored them. He moved through the aisle until he found her. Chiara. She looked up, calm, composed, beautiful in that quiet, resilient way that tore him apart every time he saw her. He opened his mouth, but she raised her hand, stopping him. "Don't," she said softly. Her voice wasn't angry. It was worse, tired. "I know why you're here," she continued, "but I need you to understand something before you speak." Janny swallowed hard, aching to reach for her, terrified to move. "I'm a woman with a disability," she said, her tone steady, unwavering. "But that doesn't make me fragile. It doesn't mean I need saving. And it doesn't mean I want someone who lies to stand beside me." His chest contracted painfully. "I can take care of myself," she whispered. "What I cannot do is build a future with someone who doesn't respect me enough to be honest." Her words felt like gentle knives polished by truth, sharp with finality. The bus creaked to a stop. A mechanical sigh. Chiara turned her face away, giving him her last mercy. "Goodbye, Janny." He stepped off the bus in silence, feeling the door close behind him like a coffin lid. The bus pulled away. Chiara didn't look back, running toward punishment. The days that followed were a blur of exhaustion and self-inflicted penance. Janny ran. Morning, afternoon, night. He ran until his lungs burned raw, until his legs trembled, until sweat soaked through every thread of his clothes. He ran until the world blurred into streaks of color and sound. He ran because he didn't deserve to rest. Because pain was easier than regret. Because in every shadow, in every gust of wind, in every rhythm of his heartbeat, he saw her. Chiara, pushing herself onto a stage. Chiara turning away from him in the church courtyard. Chiara whispering that she hated liars. Chiara smiling the night they drifted across the water under floating lanterns. Her image lived inside him, bright enough to illuminate and destroy him at the same time. The more he ran, the more he realized he wasn't trying to forget her. He was trying to become someone who deserved her. But redemption was not a finish line he could sprint toward. It was something else, something harder, something he hadn't yet discovered. Not until the night everything changed again. A call came. A message. A warning. One that would thrust him into the darkest crossroads of his life and force him to decide what love truly meant. By the time autumn arrived, the city carried the scent of dying leaves and mornings that felt colder than they should. Janny had grown used to running in that chilly dawn, punishing himself, outrunning his shame, trying to exhaust the part of him that still replayed every moment he had failed Chiara. But nothing silenced the memories. Every breath reminded him of her. Every ache in his legs echoed the pain he had carved into her heart. His world had shrunk to a single rhythm. Step, breath, regret. Step, breath, regret. On one of those raw mornings, when the horizon was still pastel blue and gold, Janny slowed on an empty road, layered with amber leaves. His lungs burned, his shirt clung to him with sweat, and his heart felt like a hammered drum in his chest. He bent forward, hands on his knees, gasping. That was when he heard her. "Are you planning to quit like that?" The voice was soft, strong, too familiar. He froze. Slowly, he lifted his head. And there she was, Chiara sitting in her wheelchair, beneath a sycamore tree, the rising sun haloing her silhouette. Her skin glowed warm in the morning light, and her curls caught the breeze like threads of shadow. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Wind rustled through dry leaves, scattering them across the path, like fate rearranging itself around their feet. Janny's chest tightened. His voice almost cracked. "Chiara." She rolled closer with a steady motion. Not rushed, not hesitant. Simply there, like she had always existed in the place his life was meant to grow toward. "You look like hell," she said quietly. He huffed a broken laugh. "I feel worse." She studied him. Her eyes held a mixture. He wasn't sure he deserved disappointment, yes, but also something gentler, something like recognition. So she asked, "You giving up?" Janny straightened slowly. Sweat dripped from his jaw. His legs trembled not from exhaustion but from the shock of her presence. "I don't know what else to do," he admitted. "Every path I take feels wrong." Chiara sighed, leaning back, crossing her arms, a gesture both stern and heartbreakingly familiar. "This is your punishment," she said, "for lying, for hurting me, for hurting yourself." Her honesty cut him open, but there was no anger in her tone now, only truth. And after punishment, his voice was rough. "What happens then?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tilted her head, studying him like she was searching for something beneath the surface, something he wasn't sure he possessed, but desperately hoped she could still find. "No one is perfect, Janny," she murmured. "But what matters is what someone does after the damage is done, whether they grow or stay broken." He swallowed hard. Then, without thinking, without caring if people saw, without considering anything except the truth he had denied for too long, he dropped to his knees before her. Leaves crunched under him. His palms trembled as he placed them gently on her knees. "Chiara," he said, voice hoarse, "I love you." Her breath caught just barely. "Not out of pity," he whispered. "Not because you're a challenge or some test I need to win. I love you because you are the strongest person I've ever known. Because you tell the truth, even when it hurts. Because you see more sitting down than I've ever seen standing up." Her eyes shimmered. Not with tears. No, Chiara was too strong for that, but with something softer, warmer. She reached forward, resting her palm against his cheek. Her thumb brushed the stubble along his jaw. "You're an idiot," she whispered. He laughed, breathless. "I know. A stubborn idiot. Yes, a reckless idiot. I deserve that. And," she added, her hand slipping down to cup his jaw fully, "a man who might finally be learning how to be honest." His chest loosened. Something inside him, something twisted, old, hollow, finally cracked open, letting light spill in. She smiled then. A small smile, but it was brighter than anything he'd seen in months. "Get up," she said softly. He rose slowly, feeling unsteady for reasons that had nothing to do with running. "Walk with me," she added. He blinked. "Walk?" She gestured at the path. "Run if you want. I'll follow. But don't run from me this time." His throat tightened. "I won't." And for the first time since everything fell apart, he believed himself. Rebuilding. The days that followed were nothing like the wild, indulgent life Janny had once lived. Those nights were gone by his own choice. He deleted numbers, ended casual flings, stopped throwing parties, stopped seeking validation in crowds and applause. He spent mornings running not from guilt, but toward clarity. He spent afternoons learning to be present, listening instead of speaking. He spent evenings with Chiara quietly simply sharing stories. Music silence. She didn't forgive him instantly. He didn't expect her to. But she let him show up. And he did again and again. When she rehearsed for performances, he sat at the back of the room silent, but unwavering. When she practiced music, he listened like it was the only sound that mattered. When she doubted herself, he reminded her of everything she had already overcome. Sometimes they argued fiercely. Chiara was no delicate flower, and Janny wasn't a saint. But each fight ended with growth, not wounds, with clearer truth, not deeper shadows. He found himself wanting to be the man she saw glimpses of the man she believed he could be. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, he became him. A love that wasn't fairy tale. Perfect. They weren't a flawless couple. They weren't a cinematic miracle. He was a white billionaire with a bruised ego learning how to be a real partner. She was a black disabled artist carving a place for herself in a world that didn't always see her clearly. They clashed. They stumbled. They rebuilt. And somewhere in the cracks, love grew. Not the shallow, glossy kind that filled the tabloids Janny used to grace. A real love. One shaped by truth, carved by mistakes, strengthened by courage. Their differences became threads weaving them closer, not pulling them apart. But fate was never truly finished. One evening, months after they reunited, Janny sat beside Chiara backstage at a theater. Her performance had ended moments earlier, applause still echoing faintly through the hall. She leaned against him, breath soft, eyes tired, but content. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. She smiled, closing her eyes. "Happier than I ever thought I could be." He brushed a curl from her forehead. "Good." Chiara lifted her chin slightly, her gaze sharpening with playful challenge. "Don't get too comfortable, McAllister," she teased. "Real love isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning." He chuckled. "Threat or promise?" "Both," she said. He kissed her forehead gently, but in the doorway unnoticed. Alexia watched them, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Her voice carried softly through the dim hallway. "So, are you two officially back together, or do I need to run another background check?" Chiara groaned. Janny jumped. Alexia smirked. And just like that, the next chapter began, not with tragedy this time, but with laughter, challenge, and the hint that new storms and new joys were already waiting on the horizon.